Good morning, everyone. I know it's early, and coffee is still getting into our system. So I'm going to share 3 stories this morning, plus my intro story, a little bit about me to give you guys kind of a framework. Because with an intro like that about knives, it's like, how do knives have to do with building relationships? That really doesn't make any sense. And so what I want to talk about is I want to go back 14 years. I was in college, had started a business working for Time Warner Cable, and was making really good money, climbing ladders and changing out parts. Unfortunately or fortunately, I fell off the ladder twice, didn't get hurt, but I was preparing for med school. And so I'm like, I'm going to end up a full-time patient, not a doctor. This is dumb. Like, I'm not a blue-collar guy. Even though I grew up on a farm, like, I knew that I was not going to work on the farm the rest of my life. And so I started to look for other opportunities. I ended up interning with Cutco, as Gary talked about. Was fortunate, though. What was really a game changer for me and really changed the whole trajectory of my life from being a med student to going into being an entrepreneur was I had a mentor at the time, and it was my girlfriend's dad. And so I pitched him the idea of giving out knives as gifts to his clients, because I noticed Paul was an attorney, but he seemed to be involved in everything in the community, oil wells, banks. And anytime anybody had an idea, they picked up the phone and called Paul. He was the first person they called. And so when you're a poor college student, you start to notice that the things that he's doing, and one of them was he was always giving things away. He'd find a deal on noodles and literally give away a semi-load of noodles at church the next Sunday. And I'd be like, Paul, that's $10,000 of noodles. He's like, I know, but everybody loves it. And he didn't even think anything of it. He'd buy, the school would have a raffle for a Harley. He'd buy a third of the tickets, and magically he'd win the Harley, and then he'd donate it back. I'm like, Paul, that was a $25,000 bike. Are you, give it to me. I'll go sell it on eBay. Like, this is crazy. And so when I pitched him the idea of giving Cutco, I thought a pocket knife. He has all these clients. He's in the country. And he got this little twinkle in his eye. He leaned back in his chair, and he said, hey, how about the paring knives? Could you engrave those with somebody's name on it? And I'm like, Paul, you're crazy. Why would you give a bunch of grown men that are like these executives, like some of them are pretty burly, why would you give them a paring knife? I said, I'll sell you as many paring knives as you want. Just tell me why. And he said, well, yeah, most of my clients are guys, but they're all married. He's like, if I do something that takes care of the whole family, he's like, everything else takes care of itself. And it was at that point that I realized that really it wasn't about the knife, it wasn't about the noodles, it was about being top of mind, it was about building relationships, it was about looking at relationships completely differently than what most people in business, I don't care if you're in New York, LA, Chicago, he was doing things different in this little, small Amish community. Half the people that were there were Amish, and he actually had grown up Amish. And so what I want to share with you is I learned from observing Paul 17 different things. I'm not going to be able to cover all 17 questions, but there's 17 things I observed in Paul, questions to ask yourself when you're building relationships. I don't care if it's billionaires like Steve Ross of the Miami Dolphins, who's a client of ours, all the way down to million-dollar entrepreneurs. People are people. And so the first story I want to share with you took place about 2 years out of college. And I joined this group called EO. It's similar to like a Tom, Hill's Angels sort of a thing, Vistage. And I was nervous. I was all daylight. I went out to this event in Vegas and was just trying to fit in. I went to this guy, and I ended up switching my major from medical to PR and marketing. And this guy was speaking on PR and marketing. It was the only session I could get into. And he starts talking about, it was the COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Anybody familiar with that company? One of the best companies in all of Canada to work for. And he's sharing how they were on Oprah, and they got 5,000 articles written about them. I'm like, I want this guy as my mentor. So at that point, I went up to him, and I found out that he was going to be coming to Cleveland the next week, or about a month later, to speak to our chapter. And so I'm like, what are you going to be doing? I wanted to build a relationship. And so the normal thing would be like, hey, you're coming in the night before, let's go to dinner, and I have Cavs tickets, LeBron's playing, it's opening night. But everybody could do that. But I didn't know what else to offer him, so I said, hey, do you want to go out to dinner and to a Cavs game? He said, absolutely. I said, what else are you going to do? He's like, well, the $1 a week, I'm going to go buy a bunch of clothes. I said, where at? And he said, Brooks Brothers. So I'm thinking on my feet, I'm like, I got to do something. I said, what's your shirt size? I want to get you one of my favorite shirts. It's Jose Bank. And he looks at me kind of funny. He's like, what the heck? He's like, I'm 16 and a half, 36, 37. Okay. So as luck would have it, he flies in, and a bunch of his flights almost get delayed, and he's almost not going to make it. And he's like, do you just want to cancel? And I'm like, no. So I take my American Express card, and I go over next door. We're at the Ritz, and I go over to the Brooks Brothers store, and I say, here's the guy's shirt size. I want one of every one of the new collection for the fall. I want the sweaters, the belts, the pants. It was $7,000 worth of clothes. And I went back over to the Ritz and I said, hey, I got this great idea. I said, there's a VIP coming to town. I want to do something really cool for them, for this VIP. Are you open to it? And they said, absolutely. So we merchandised this whole room to look like a Brooks Brothers store. So about an hour later, he arrives. And he's like, hey, do you just want me to check my bags with the bellhop? I'm like, no. Take your time. Go get refreshed. Come back down whenever you're ready. Me and my business partner having a drink in the bar there. And he comes down, and his eyes are the size of silver dollars. He's like, John, I've had some pretty cool things happen. I just gave a quote to this customer service book for John DeJulius. I thought the Four Seasons was amazing because they remembered my name and had a bottle of water waiting for me after a jog. He's like, whatever you want to talk about, for as long as you want to talk about it, I am all ears. The night was amazing. Now fast forward, years later, he's opening up doors to the president of Starbucks in crazy places I could have never have pried open. Never have pried open. Now why did that work? One, the key that you always need to ask yourself when you're going to do any sort of gifting or any sort of relationship building is to ask yourself, is it personalized? Is it personalized? There's a recent study that came out. I'm not sure when it came out, but if you ask people what to name their 5 favorite letters from the alphabet, 9 out of 10 times, what letters do they write down? The letters from their name. They do it subconsciously. We all want to be treated as a person. We want our name. Everything has to be personalized. But when we go to take time to build a relationship, we do the exact same things as everybody else does. We take them out to dinner. We take them out to a ball game. We send them some sort of swag bag with our logo emblazoned on the side of it. We don't do anything that's personalized that say this person is somebody of value. And what Paul understood was that if you make the gift all about the recipient, if you make the event all about the recipient, it's amazing the doors that open. It's amazing the relationships that are established. But in our Western culture, we've said, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy. A text message is enough. It's not rocket science what Paul did. It's worked 100 years ago and it'll work today. So ask yourself, every single time that you're in a business gifting or really even interpersonal relationships, even with your spouse, is the gift truly personalized or is it all about me? Because in our Western culture, we usually say, I'm going to spend this much, I want my logo to be on it, as opposed to putting the person's name on it. The second story I want to share quickly is around the idea of asking yourself, when would it mean the most? When would this mean the most? So we're in the holidays right now. I mean, it's 3 weeks away from Thanksgiving, so everybody, I don't care if you're, bah humbug, like Grinch kind of person, like you start to feel guilty towards the end of the year, and you're like, it's Christmas, so you get in the Christmas spirit, and so most people around this time, this is the time when they say, I'm going to be generous. I'm going to be giving. And what was amazing about Paul was he asked himself, when would it mean the most? He did things at the most random times to surprise and delight. So ironically, we run a very high-level gifting company. We work with pro sports teams. We work with all these different companies. We actually tell them, do not buy Christmas gifts, which seems like the antithesis of a gifting company. How could you tell people not to buy gifts? Like, are you crazy? No. Because we ask ourselves, when would a gift mean the most? Is it going to mean the most when they have 47 other gifts sitting on their conference table? When they have 5 sausage baskets and 3 bottles of wine? No, it's not going to mean the most then. And so one of our first clients right out of college, I got the opportunity to speak at Purdue at this big ag business conference. And John Deere's there, and Monsanto, all these big companies are there. And I got to speak on stage with the president of Cutco, the owner of Cutco. He's an engineer, and so we got to share some stories. One of the guys came up afterwards, and they owned it's called AgriGold. It's a seed corn company. And they said, hey, we want to target these farmers, but these farmers won't give us the time of day. They farm on average 5,000 to 10,000 acres. They can jump on a tractor and be gone in 30 seconds. A lot of them have relationships with Pioneer, and their great-grandfather used Pioneer. We need something that will really engage these farmers that are running really big companies to really take notice. And so one of the things we said was, well, when should we do this sort of gift? How should we get these doors open with these folks? And so we decided, one, it needed to be frequent. It needed to be more than one gift to really break through and establish a relationship. The second thing we realized is, to do it, let's say at Christmas isn't going to work. So we said, right after spring planting season, these guys are going to be whooped. They put in long days. Let's do something then, going right into the summertime. And you can't give a farmer a Rolex or something, so we had to do something that was very practical, but still cool and unique. And so we built the entire campaign around ice cream, which doesn't seem sexy, but the entire program was built around. So they picked their top 2,000 prospects. They had about 80 sales guys pick their top 25. And the first gift that we sent out, 2,000 of, was this custom-made ceramic ice cream bowl. It was heavy, it was made out of stoneware, it was huge, and it represented the foundation of the company. So we mailed out 2,000 of them with a little card and waited a week. Second week, we took this high, $40 Cutco ice cream scoop, saying, here's the scoop, and here's some of the awards that we've won. Put this little card in, mailed off 2,000 of them. Third week comes. We get these dry ice coolers, put in Schwann's vanilla ice cream dry ice pack, talking about the cream of the crop. Sent it out, 2,000 gallons all across the Midwest. The fourth week, the sales rep showed up with ice cream toppings in hand to have a conversation. And instead of getting 20 seconds, most of the time they got 2 hours. The wife was there, the farmer was there, they sat down at the kitchen table, they were blown away. Why? They asked themselves, when would this and what would make the most sense? What would be the most meaningful to these guys? And the frequency, the personalization, it was amazing. They did the campaign 2 years in a row. And the fun part is, the marketing director, is the same guy. He left to go to Scotts, the big lawn care company. He got us into NASCAR, which led to the NFL, which led to the NBA. The other cool part was one of the people that were on his marketing team is now my wife. And so I made the sale there as well. But she was on the part of the team to kind of organize things. And so it was one of my favorite stories to share. But it really exemplifies, ask yourself, when would it mean the most? And it's not when everybody else is doing it. It's not as a token. It's not that way. The last thing I'll share, most of the time, I don't care if it's in business or even if in your personal lives, most people have a way of saying, what's the least I could get away with and still be okay? So like when we're going to a graduation party, we say, should I give $50 to this kid or should I give $100? What's the least I could get away with? Like we don't say what we should ask, which is, what's the most I could give? What's the most I could give in a situation? And Paul was amazing about that. I mean, who buys a semi-load of noodles and gives them out to basically, just friends and relatives at church the following Sunday? He always asked himself what the most that he could give was. And early in my business career, I had to ask myself this often, but I didn't have a huge budget. I couldn't spend a bunch of money on a fancy website or on fancy brochures. So I said, what's one of the few things that I can give out on a regular basis that might be able to communicate that we're for real? Like now we give away hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts, but at the time I could barely give away, 5 gifts. And so I said, most people pass out a business card on a pretty regular basis, and most people say, what's the cheapest I can get this business card for? I want it for 3 cents, or maybe I'm going to dial it up with a little bit of fancy foil at 4 cents or 5 cents. So I said, what's the craziest, what would a $1 business card look like? And I asked some of my friends, they're like, you want to spend $1 on your business card? Are you nuts? And so I'm like, I don't even know. I didn't even know what $1. So I'm watching a movie. Any of you guys seen the movie Hitch? I love that movie for a lot of reasons, but one is this story specifically. So I'm watching Hitch, and he's cool, and he's a matchmaker, and he's, do you guys remember the business card from that movie? Anybody? To me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. He passes out his card, and it's a black, square, thick cardboard piece with just his name, Hitch, in silver writing, and then his phone number. That's all it says on it, and it's a perfect little square. I'm like, that's going to be my card. So I start researching how I can even take that up a notch. And so my original card that cost $1 was square like this, and it was black, and it was basically a coated piece of aluminum, and it cost $1, and I passed it out. And it was amazing how at a networking function or in the suite, I'd meet the CEO of Lowe's, and I'd hand him a card. And I would explain, we do high-level strategic gifting for people, which would be like, what does that really mean? And then I'd hand him my card, and all of a sudden, everything I was saying was exemplified in this little touch point. And so I asked myself again, could we take it up a notch? Our cards now are $3. They're a piece of steel, they're cut 100 different ways. But when I pass this out, people are like, I get it. Touch points matter. Ask myself the question, how can I take it up a notch? How can I be different? And all of that gets encapsulated in a $3 business card. Now, what's funny is I actually save money as a result of spending $3 on my business card, because most people will spend $10 on their brochure that's fancy and has all this gloss and all these crazy pictures. And what do you think happens as soon as you leave that presentation or that meeting to that beautiful piece of art? It gets used as toilet paper. I mean, it's pitched 9 times out of 10 immediately. So instead of spending $10, I spend $3. And 3 years later, I can put metal business card in my subject line of an email, and people still will respond, and they immediately remember the conversation. So as I wrap up, if you want the other 14 questions to ask yourself, you can go to rulingroup.com, you can go to Undivided. I think there's some tools that are there. You can go to johnruland.com. What we do in business and relationship building is not rocket science. It's just a matter of saying, we ask ourselves the tough questions and we're willing to really do it. Is it personalized? When would it mean the most? And what's the most I could give in this situation? It's amazing when you take the time to do those, ask yourself those sorts of questions in the hecticness and the busyness of life, the relationships and the byproducts and the fruit that come from asking yourself those sorts of questions. Thanks so much.